The ball is still in the air. That is where the story begins. Not with a press conference quote or a ranking number or a historical footnote. With a ball traveling across center court at Wimbledon on the 4th of July, 2026, struck from an impossibly wide angle, a running cross-court forehand that nobody in the building is certain will land inside the line. The scoreboard already reads 62 in the second set. The first set went to a tiebreak that she won 11 points to 9, saving set points along the way. This is the third match point of the final game. She saved for break points just to get here. And across the net, the defending Wimbledon champion is stranded on the wrong side of the court, watching the ball travel, unable to reach it, waiting for the same answer that 7,000 miles away a country of 110 million people is waiting for. Then the ball lands. Then the roar comes. And then quietly and permanently, the record book rewrites itself. Now, let's talk about what that moment actually means because the headline version of this story undersells it considerably. The word upset is doing too much work and not enough at the same time. Yes, Alex was the 29th seed and Swiatek was the 3rd seed and the defending champion and a 6-time Grand Slam champion and the woman who won this tournament 12 months ago by a scoreline so dominant it barely qualified as contest. All of that is true, but the real story is older and quieter and more significant than any single afternoon on any single court is the story of a ceiling. A ceiling that no Filipino tennis player, male or female, had ever broken through an entire open era of professional tennis, which stretches back to 1968. Before this week began, no Filipino player had ever won a main draw match at Wimbledon. That was the first ceiling. Alex broke it in the first round. No Filipino player had ever reached the third round of any Grand Slam in the Open era. That was the second ceiling. She broke it in the second round. No Filipino player had ever reached the second week of a major from the inside. That was the third ceiling. She broke it by getting to the fourth round. And then she walked onto center court and beat the defending champion. And that was the fourth ceiling in 5 days. And by the time the ball landed inside the line on that cross-court forehand, the building of ceilings above her head had been completely demolished. To understand the arc of this specific player reaching this specific moment, you need two numbers sitting next to each other. 16 months before that match point landed on center court, Alex walked onto a hard court in Miami ranked 140th in the world. She was 19 years old. She was a wild card. She beat Iga Swiatek for the first time and at the time it was treated as a remarkable one-off. The kind of result that happens occasionally when a young player catches a champion on the wrong day. The tennis world noted it moved on. 16 months later, she walked onto center court at Wimbledon as the 29th seed, ranked 32nd in the world with a career high of 29th reached earlier in the season. And she beat again, this time in the third round of a Grand Slam on grass with the defending title on the line. And nobody who had been watching the grass court swing with any attention was genuinely shocked because the arc from that Miami wild card to this Wimbledon seating is not a spike or a fluke or a fortunate draw. Is 400 days of deliberate, sustained, upward movement that changed what was possible for an entire country's relationship with the sport of tennis. Let's go through the match itself because the numbers deserve to be heard clearly. The first set lasted 1 hour and 24 minutes. One set longer than some full best-of-3 matches finish. It was decided by a tiebreak that went 20 points and Alex won at 11-9 saving set points along the way. That is not a set stolen by chaos or opponent errors or a lucky net cord at a critical moment. That is a set won by the player who was cleaner under pressure, deeper on the return, and more willing to hit directly through the point rather than looking for the safe play around it. The shape of the second set explained everything the first set had suggested. Both players disappeared for a lengthy bathroom break after the tie break. When they came back, Alex broke serve immediately in the opening game. She broke again to build a double break. Swiatek fought back, broke once, threatened to break again, and at 15:40 on her own serve sent a backhand volley wide. The double break was restored. 6-2 match over. The statistics that came out afterward answered the question that every upset invites. Was this real or was this luck? Alex broke serve 5 times across 2 sets. She won 68% of points on the champion's second delivery. 68%. That means that nearly 7 out of every 10 times served a second serve, Alex won the point. That is not a player hanging on. That is a player suffocating an opponent's serve, turning the moment that is supposed to give a server a second chance into a weapon pointed back at them. And the unforced error count told the rest of the story. Alex made 21. Swiatek made 44. That gap, 23 more unforced errors from the defending champion, does not happen because a player is unlucky or distracted or having an off day in the normal sense. It happens because the opponent is applying a level and a quality of pressure that makes errors inevitable. Alex imposed that pressure deliberately and consistently for 2 sets of tennis on the most watched court in the sport. That is not a fluke. Read the numbers again. Is not a fluke. There is something worth noting about how Swiatek herself talked about Alex before they played. Asked about facing her on grass in the days leading up to the match. She was honest in a way that champions rarely are publicly. She said she did not particularly know Alex's game on this surface. She had watched a little. She knew the hard court and clay versions of this opponent because they had already played twice on those surfaces, 1 win each. But grass was new territory. That is not a champion being dismissive or careless. That is a champion acknowledging a genuine knowledge gap, which is a different and actually more concerning thing. It means her preparation for the specific tactical problem Alex poses on grass was incomplete. And Alex, who'd spent the entire grass swing building exactly that tactical problem, walked onto the court with a level of preparation that the scoreline and the error count both confirmed. The grass version of Alex had been in development all spring. The Wimbledon draw got the finished product. Before this fortnight even began, Hall of Famer Kim Kistus was asked in a video preview to name a player she was watching on the women's side going into the grass season. Her answer, unprompted, was Alex. She talked about a win Alex had recorded during the grass swing and said it was a good win. Said it was the kind of result that made her take notice. That quote matters not because of who said it, but because of when it was said. Before the Wimbledon draw, before the third round, before center court, a four-time Grand Slam champion was already identifying Alex as an active incredible threat during the grass swing, which is exactly the window that produced a result that everyone is now calling a shock. It was only a shock if you weren't watching in June. And everyone who was watching in June already knew what was coming. What was coming had been building since Birmingham. 6 weeks before Wimbledon, Alex won a grass court title there, coming back from set down in the final to lift the trophy. She went to Berlin and beat two top 10 players on the same surface in consecutive matches. The world number 2 and the world number 8 back-to-back. She arrived at Wimbledon having already beaten 3 top 10 opponents on grass in 2026 before the tournament began. Which means that when she walked onto center court to face the defending champion, she was not discovering her grass court game. She was deploying it at the highest possible level against the most demanding possible test. She passed. But here is the detail in her preparation story that the results don't fully capture. 1 week before Wimbledon, on the same grass surface in Bad Hamburg in Germany, Alex lost in the opening round to Elise Merren 3-3 in straight sets. Not a close match, not a heartbreaker, a routine one-sided result on the very surface. She was about to light up at the All England club. There was no obvious narrative thread leading out of that afternoon. Just a first-round loss and a flight to London. And whatever happens inside a competitor's mind when the tournament that defines the season is a week away and the most recent result is a loss. She talked about it in a press conference during Wimbledon, though not directly about that specific match. She was asked what she loves most about professional tennis. She answered without pausing to arrange her words. She said she loves facing pressure moments head-on. She said she loves coming out of those moments stronger than when she entered them. She said it 2 days before she beat the defending champion. The pressure moment was already on the schedule. She was already describing how she feels about it. Now, there is the matter of what happened on that court after the match was won because the on-court interview contains a moment that traveled further and faster than any scoreline. Alex stood at the microphone still catching her breath, the crowd still processing what it had just witnessed, and she talked about being a kid. She talked about going to the courts every single day after school with her brother and her grandfather. She talked about what she was wearing when she went, ruffled socks and shoes that lit up when she walked. And she described herself with chubby cheeks and a love for hitting a tennis ball that had nothing to do with rankings or titles or any of the things she is now surrounded by. And she said that this win, this result, this moment on this court was everything. Then she said, it goes out to all the little girls with ruffled socks and chubby cheeks. It means the world. That is not a media line. That is not a prepared answer. That is a 21-year-old professional athlete standing in the biggest moment of her career and choosing to point directly back at the version of herself that existed before any of this was possible and telling every child who resembles that version that they and the person standing on center court are the same person, the same journey, the same potential, just different points on the same road. The cultural dimension of this story cannot be separated from a sporting one, and it would be dishonest to try. The Philippines is a country of 110 million people. Its tennis infrastructure has never been deep. The country has not historically been a pipeline for professional players the way some tennis nations are. What Alex inherited from her country in terms of institutional support was modest. What she brought to it in terms of a family, a small circle of coaches, a lot of hours, and a decision made at 13 years old to travel across the world to train at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mecca was considerable. She said it in her own words during the on-court interview. She and her team and her family are the ones who have been at the courts for 12 hours in a row. They are the ones waking up early and coming home late. The system did not push her to this. She and the people around her pulled themselves to it. And what that produces beyond the personal achievement is a permission slip. That is the phrase worth holding on to when thinking about what Alex's Wimbledon run means for tennis in the Philippines and across Southeast Asia. A first ever round of 16 at Wimbledon is a permission slip issued by one person to everyone behind her. It tells every 9-year-old picking up a racket for the first time in Manila or Cebu or Davao that the ceiling they were told existed for someone from where they come from is not real. It tells them in a language that a coaching manual or a scholarship brochure or a federation announcement simply cannot speak. It tells them through a scoreline on the most famous lawn in the sport, through a ball landing inside a line, through a crowd that erupted in southwest London while a country erupted 7,000 miles away. The cameras at Wimbledon caught Filipino fans on Henman Hill during the match, gathered around a screen, watching every point, holding their breath in the same way that everyone else watching was holding theirs. That is a diaspora with a physical footprint at the All England club, not just an online presence or social media trend. Real people who got to Wimbledon somehow through connections or queues or whatever it took because they needed to be there for this. And the tour noticed, the governing bodies noticed. The sponsorship conversations are different now. The market for tennis in the Philippines expands every time Alex wins in front of these cameras. Which means the courts and the coaching and the funding and the belief that a young player in that country can hold about what is available to her all expand with it. That is the compounding effect of one person doing something that was supposed to be impossible and doing it in front of the whole world. Now the visor, because the visor belongs in this story. During her second round press conference, Alex explained the Tagalog phrase stitched into the back of her Nike visor. She translated it herself on the record in her own words. Once it grows, it cannot be stopped. She chose those words. She had them sewn into the fabric before the tournament began, before the first round, before the tiebreak went to 119. Before the third match point landed on center court. The phrase was already on her clothing when all of those things happened, which means it was not a reaction. It was a declaration made in advance. It reads, now looking back across this Wimbledon fortnight, less like motivation and more like a diagnosis. Something has been growing for years in Mecca, in the junior circuit, in the early professional rounds, in Miami in March 2025 when she first beat as a wild card and the tennis world moved on too quickly. In Birmingham and Berlin during the grass swing when she was quietly building the body of evidence that the draw at Wimbledon would eventually have to reckon with. And on center court on the 4th of July, 2026 when the ball landed inside the line and the record book rewrote itself and 110 million people erupted in a time zone 7,000 miles from southwest London. It grew and now it cannot be stopped. The round of 16 is done. The quarterfinal is next. Alex is on the order of play. She is not a wild card visiting the deep rounds out of nowhere. She is the 29th seed ranked 32nd in the world listed on the draw sheet as an occupant of the second week playing matches that the scheduling committee treats as center court events because they understand what they have on their hands. The paper and the result agree she belongs here. The ruffled socks and the chubby cheeks and the light-up shoes and the grandfather and the afternoon sessions after school and the 12-hour days and the flight to Mecca at 13 years old and the 400 days from wild card to seed and the 4 ceilings broken in 5 days all belong here too. They brought her here and wherever here goes next, whatever the quarterfinal brings, whatever the draw produces and whatever the grass asks of her in the next round, she has already told us how she feels about pressure moments. She loves them. She said so 2 days before she beat the defending champion. The schedule is already set. The story is already moving. Subscribe and stay with us because whatever happens next, you want to be here when the next point decides.